Oh, hi guys. Just going to do a really quick vid here on belt selection for your grinders. So I hope it's of some use, and it's what I've learnt over the last sort of year and a half, trial and error, bit of money. So hopefully you'll save a bit of money on wasted things and wasted ideas, and get some bit of an idea of somewhere to start. Which it's expensive enough to start with, so maybe that'll help. It's just partly what I've seen and heard and experimented with, and then this is what I've actually settled on. So with that, I'll crack on with the belts. Well, there we are, a bit of a break between that one and this one, and went outside for the dogs. Absolutely hammered it down. I've had to get bloody changed and sorted. But anyway, this was just a quickie on the grinding belts that I've settled on, and it's nothing fancy. But I've been experimenting with different things, and obviously listened to a lot of people have said and what other makers are using. Because they're not cheap at the end of the day. Like I believe SGW Knives, great site. He says treat your belts like they're free. Because if you don't, you get a belt. The more worn it gets, the more pressure you're putting on, the more time it takes, the more heat you're building up, all sorts of crap. So to a large extent, it's true. Well, it is true. But what then you've got to do is obviously try and get the best out of your belts and get the most for them. Because, like I say, they're not free. But what I've settled on now. And like I say, I don't have you see, there's not a massive selection. I don't have big piles hung over one hook. But what I tend to do is I'm finding the ceramics for the main grinding. And I've tried the Nortons, and I think these are the Herms. And a lot of makers use the Norton. They're a great belt, they are a great belt. But what I found is they weren't sort of like half as good again as I think it's Herms belts. Herm or Herm? Herms. So, there was significant greater cost, but not that much of a benefit when it actually came to, the work that they actually did. Lasted a little bit longer, but not a lot. Didn't cut any, and I didn't notice any difference in the way they cut. So, for this, my sort of like, I tend to go for about the 50. I haven't gone down to the 30s and things. I've been experimenting between 50s and 60s, and I'm gradually getting down, so now I'm picking 50s. So, I use a 50 ceramic, which is for the heavy grinding, putting the initial bevels on, that kind of thing. And then what I do is I'll get a new one out, or I'll make sure not necessarily be a new one. I don't put a new one on. Some say they put a new one on for every bevel. I think if you're doing the really high grinds and you're doing the full height grinds and things, obviously it's a lot more wear. I do quite a few of the Scandis, so obviously there's a lot less wear on a belt. But the minute I find that when I'm taking it across, that I'm starting to get waves, that's off. And what I've got is I've actually got 3 hooks up here. The first 3 hooks are for the new belt, so that's the one that is actually cutting really, really well. The second one is a bit of an older one, and I use that for profiling and things like that, or I might take the bevel down sort of like maybe half, 2/3 of the way, then swap to the new one to get it nice and flat before it then goes to heat treat. I take off about probably 2/3 of the bevel before I go to heat treat. That way I'm not grinding, basically destroying belts, grinding afterwards, and I'm still taking quite a bit of steel off. I have no issue with decarb because of what I do, but that's the 60s. And then obviously the really old belts, they're what I actually just use for really heavy grinding, just basically grinding shapes out and things like that, so I get as much use out of them. As soon as that starts to look a bit shiny, or it's building up heat, if it's building up heat, and what I find is if I'm grinding, so I'm actually grinding the steel off, and the blue colour, the heat is actually rising up quicker than you're taking steel off, your belt's knackered, so that goes in the bin. So that's what I use for. That's the sort of like the 50 grits. I might try the next batch. I might get some 36, is it, or 38, something like that. Just give them a bit of a try, see how they go. From there, I got the 120s. Previously, what I was doing, I was going to the 120s, and I was going straight to aluminium oxide belts and using them as cleaning up. But I was taking it a lot further down with the heavier belt. What I'm finding is I'm getting much nicer, cleaner bevels by just going sort of like getting it sort of like 3/4 finished with their really heavy belt. Then I swap to a 120 ceramic, and that gives me much nicer, cleaner lines. Then I jump to the 240 on the aluminium oxide. So I use 244 and 6, and that gives me a good clean up on the bevels. The flats I haven't got anything to do with the flats and things. I'm hoping I might get myself sorted out with the surface grinder one day, but so at the minute I don't. Once I've got everything flat, all the flats go by hand. But the bevels, I can get the bevels up to 600, and that gets it really quite a nice finish. But what I've found is that the ceramics, and it's true, I got a tip from, I apologise, somebody did it was one of the guys who does a lot of stuff on YouTube. My Little Life or something. I do apologise, you know, if anybody watches him, and I've got it, something like that. But he said he went away from the 120s, and he was right. What I found is that the heavier backing on the 120 ceramics keeps them cleaner grind lines. It's much easier to get the cleaner grind lines. Then once you go into the 240, you're not really grinding steel off. You're just cleaning down. So be careful with them. I get a nice finish, and I'm getting a nice clean finish with them. So that's when I use the aluminium oxide. So it's the ceramics, and I've tried also. I'm still using some of the zirconiums. What I found is that the ceramic lasts significantly longer than the zirconium, and there's not a lot of difference in price. So again, it is sort of like a bit money orientated. They do just as good a job, but they don't last as long, and like I say, they're virtually the same price, so it's a no-brainer really. I stick with the ceramics. And then from there, the last ones I've got on, which are the J-Flex yellow belts. And when I first started, I bought a batch of every one of them, and I thought that's all I knew, and off I went with them, and I thought, God, they don't last very long, they're crap. But then what I found out is the yellow one, and again, it's a J-Flex, I don't even know, Kingsfloor. The whole point of them is that the aluminium oxide, because that's what they are again, is a much more open weave, so they don't clog up the same. So if you've got the sort of like the red aluminium oxide and you're using them on wood, micarta, G10, anything like that, they clog up really, really quickly. They last a lot longer. Put them on anything hard, they just strips them to bits. But for the softer materials, they don't clog up as well, and they actually last longer than the red aluminium oxide. So that's basically the three sets that I use. The ceramics for the 50s, 120s, aluminium oxide 240, 400 and 600. Anything after that then I do by hand, and I finish by hand anyway because it gives you a different finish to the machine. And then from a 60 grit up to, and I've actually gone up to the 600s just because that's what I bought when I first started. In reality, with the J-Flex, I actually only generally use the 60s and the 120s, and I just use that to take the heavy meat off. And then what I find is that then I go to hand sanding, and I buy the rolls. I buy the shop rolls, and you can just pull it and rip a bit off. And again, that's just aluminium oxide. But the reason for that is, if you know, I use it to take the 60. I use that for flattening blocks and things like that, so I can put it on the platen and get it pretty flat, and then it goes on to hand flattening. Or taking the corners off on the handle scales and things like that, or taking big lumps off and rounding things. But again, I only go to about maybe, at the most, maybe 2/3 of the way in, and then I go to hand sanding, because one slip and you're having to take the scales off. So, you know, and again, even with the higher grits, you can't, I personally, I just don't get that nice finish. You can put it on a slack belt and get some of the meat off. But I just find that I make less mistakes and get a better finish swapping. As soon as I get to the 120, that just gets the big scratches out, and then, like I said, then I go on to hand sanding. So that's the three types of belts I use, and I found that to be, you know, probably the most cost-effective way of doing it. I don't have heaps and heaps of money to just throw at everything, you know. If I could sell a lot more knives, then maybe I could turn that money into buying more gear, but at the minute, we're building up. It's all a journey, it's all learning. So I hope, you know, if there's anybody out there who is, you know, getting going on things, and it doesn't matter whether you're using a 2B72 or a 2B48 or whatever, you know, the belts work, you know, you're looking at the same sort of thing for the belts. But like I say, the ceramics, they might have all their, I think I paid $12 for a ceramic. The aluminium oxide are about $5.50, $6 over here, but they last about 4 times longer. So it's half the cost, and they cut an awful lot quicker, quite a lot cooler. And that's the other thing. If you're not, like I say, if you're not swapping your belts out, they're just going to get hot and just, you know, make you a lot more work. So keep an eye on that. As soon as you start to get wavy edges, they're not doing what you want. Bin them. So like I say, I hope that was a bit of an interest and a bit of a help to somebody possibly, and a bit of a record for me one day when I look back and think, God, did I really use those belts? They were shit, God. But anyway, we will see with that. So you guys, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like and all the nice stuff. Instagram, Bush Bimbler on Instagram, outdoors, knives, dogs, hunting, fishing, when I get out of putting stuff on there. Facebook, anybody in New Zealand, get onto Facebook, Bushcrafting NZ. I'm trying to get a bit of stuff going. You know, there's lots of hunting and pig hunting and fishing and all sorts of stuff like that, but not a lot for the bushcrafting guys. So there's not a lot on there at the minute, so you know, don't go and expect wonderful things. I keep trying to put pictures on there, the same as Instagram, but hopefully if we can maybe, you know, start meeting up. There's already a young chap who joined a little while ago, quite keen to meet up with other like-minded people, and he's, you know, he's starting out on his bushcraft journey, so, you know, it'd be great if, you know, if we could sort of like link people up and things like that. So with that, I will sign off, because enough. And like I say, thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one, guys.